Welcome to the Mind Chimp podcast. Hey Myles, welcome to the Mind Chimp podcast. How are we doing?
I'm good, thank you, Danny. Thank you for having me.
No, it's an absolute pleasure. It's an absolute pleasure. So, always want to kind of get straight in there, Myles. Can I just ask you to pick six? What I want you to do is pick four numbers, please.
Four numbers.
From 1 to 100.
1 to 100. Okay, 73.
Yep.
50.
50.
25.
Okay.
And 91.
Perfect. We shall return to them a little bit later on.
Okay, it's very mysterious. Thank you.
Always. So, when I have my guests on, Myles, I tend to ask them to try and summarise or come up with a log line of what summarises them. Can you remember what yours was?
I think I can come up with something that I think it should be.
Go for it.
Yeah, an interesting challenge this was for me. I hadn't really seen the idea of a log line before, and then read some brilliant ones and then felt the pressure. But I'll have a go. So I'd say that I am someone who's been working for 25 plus years in the digital world, and I'm now trying to bring my experience and insights to learning teams and organizations who are struggling with what to do about digital now.
Okay. So we're definitely going to jump into that one.
Okay.
So I guess before we get into kind of a good question, Myles, when you was in school and the teacher would come up to you and say, Myles, what is it you want to be when you grow up? Can you remember what you used to say to them teachers?
I think, so if I could have two answers to that. One, I think when I was at primary school, so when I was wearing, and I went to primary school in an era where we used to wear short trousers. So okay. when I was that age, I wanted to be a professional cricketer, I think.
Okay.
And then when I got older, sort of teenage plus, then I wanted to be a musician, and I'd still want to be a musician. Actually, I think if I could do anything, that's what I'd do.
Perfect. So, I guess let's kind of Myles, we kind of engage on LinkedIn and whatnot. But I guess for some of my listeners who might not know who you are, maybe you could give us a bit of a whistle-stop tour of who you are and kind of where you've come from to where you are right now.
Yeah, okay, right. So I'll start, I guess. So I left university a very, very long time ago and was very quickly encouraged by my bank manager to pay back my overdraft. And then I sort of fell into doing work in information research in banking for corporate banking. So people doing big deals needed lots of kind of industry analysis and information. And I moved from that. I didn't like the world of corporate banking at all. It didn't fit me very well. So I moved from that. So having said I didn't like that, I then moved to management consulting, which was probably not necessarily a brilliant sidestep. But I did have a very good time at Anderson Consulting for about 4 or 5 years, doing information and strategy research. So this is kind of corporate strategy research for a variety of different projects and clients, which taught me a lot about business. It taught me a lot about kind of strategic imperatives. It's where I first got into what we now call digital as well. I guess that was when we were working with what we used to call the information superhighway back in the kind of mid-90s when the information superhighway was going to change the world. And so that really was my first exposure to working with technology at work, which is nothing like that. It was nothing to do with anything I'd done before. I moved from Anderson Consulting because I found that culture really swallowed me, and I was very uncomfortable with it. I was very unhappy there personally. And then I sort of took a left turn into the BBC and started working then in BBC Worldwide, which was the commercial arm of the BBC. It's what that was then called. Worked way back when in what was BBC Learning in the commercial environment, so working on content for schools and colleges for BBC IP. And then I left the BBC. I did come back, but I left the BBC at that point and went to work through. Sorry, I've got that chronology wrong actually. No, then I went to Anderson's, and then I came back to the BBC later. And I worked at the BBC in what was called BBC Corporate Strategy in around the sort of the turn of the millennium and the late 90s. And that's where I really got into, I think, what we would now call online and digital, where I worked with various teams on the early days of the BBC online service. So it's where BBC Education, BBC News and the BBC website started. So worked on the kind of audience strategy and the content strategy and measurement and analysis. for those services. So that was really, where I sort of, cut my teeth, I suppose, on planning and managing digital services, or working on them anyway. I wasn't senior enough to really manage them at that time. And then from there, back in 2000, 2001, I, like everyone else, decided to leave the BBC to become a millionaire and work in an internet startup. And I did that for 9 months, and notably and famously, along with millions of others, didn't become a millionaire, but was left after 9 months because the founders very smartly thought, we're not investing in this anymore, which was a business-to-business startup. It's like a marketplace for small businesses, a sort of network and marketplace for small businesses. I did work with them on their on a kind of metrics and measurement strategy, and a lot of user experience and user interface work with them, on membership structure and that kind of thing. And then I left that and joined Ask Jeeves, which I don't know, you might not be old enough to remember Ask Jeeves, Danny, I don't know.
Oh no, I do remember good old Jeeves, yes.
Yeah, so I worked with Ask Jeeves for about 7 years, I think I did, and that was a really great time. I remember it very fondly, and I learned an enormous amount there. I joined Ask Jeeves as a kind of researcher in the marketing team. Then I moved from that to took on various different roles, sort of more in the kind of analysis and planning, worked on the kind of commercial analysis, and then spent some time as the director of strategy there, and helped sort of put the plans in place to launch from Jeeves into Europe, which was interesting. How do you take a brand like Jeeves into continental Europe? And worked a lot with the US parent company as well, and was involved in plans for restructuring the organization, partnerships with Google, etc. And then after about 7 years, competing with Google in search is tiring, I would say. I wouldn't advise it. And moved from there back to the BBC. So I went for a second stint at the BBC, where I worked in BBC Education, or what's called BBC Learning. I had a very grand job title. I was the head of interactive learning, which, yeah, the BBC is very good for job title inflation. I think, it's still, people are called. There was someone who was the controller of the internet at the BBC at one time, which is possibly the best job title I've ever heard. Controller, internet. But I was the head of interactive learning, which was really sort of running the services online and on air, but mainly online for schools and colleges and school teachers. So GCSE and BBC Bite Size was the big brand in the stable there. And then I shifted from there to work at the BBC Academy as the head of digital, when the learning team moved to Salford. And I was at the Academy for about 5 years, I think, as the head of digital. And the Academy is effectively the BBC's learning and development function. So I was responsible for the technology and the digital strategy and digital content development, product development, etc., for about 5 years. And then left there to become a freelance consultant about just over 3 years ago, which is what I'm now doing. So I'm sort of, as I was hoping to reference in the log line, now trying to sort of make sense and bring to bear that experience of various different digital areas and roles and sectors to the learning and development world, which is what I've been working in, I suppose, for the last 8 years or so.
Wow. So, I mean, where to even start?
I sounded like I just said a lot of words in one stream there. So yeah, take your pick wherever you want to light on there. So it's been I guess you could call it a varied career, or you could call it a series of kind of accidents and coincidences as well, I think, which is probably the story for many careers, people I know, really, I guess.
Yeah, I reckon so. I think, I mean, I instantly want to go into kind of the BBC first, if that's all right.
Mm-hmm.
So, I guess, sure. What was instantly when you hear names like BBC and big names, and you kind of assume that, wow, they must be so ahead of the curve, and they must be doing top secret stuff or whatever, and they're doing everything what everyone is going to catch up to later on down the line. But what was your experience of that? It's kind of like this Instagram versus reality kind of thing. Like, is it as good as that?
Yeah, I don't know. I suppose my experience of the BBC. I mean, the BBC means so many things to so many different people, both as an employee there, but also as an audience member or license fee payer or whatever. But I think when the BBC does things well, I think it actually doesn't chase the first mover innovation in its pure sense. I think it's smarter than that to find and adopt and use technologies that will further its objectives. So if you think the BBC's objectives, as Lord Reith famously laid out, to inform, educate and entertain, and I think what the BBC's done well is to look at new technologies and see how can they enhance the organisation's ability to meet those objectives, to inform, educate and entertain. So I think when I was there, I think it was when the BBC started to really get to grips with what the internet meant. I think in its earliest phases, it was how could the BBC use the web and the emerging web platforms that it created to create new services, and to seek government approval for those services, which was a big part of the work that we were doing in the late 90s. Does the BBC have a justifiable position to take a license to serve audiences in those technologies? I think that was really interesting. I think where the BBC gets a bit more stuck is when it tries to just do the innovation, and I think that's not necessarily its best position. So I've always felt that the BBC is at its best with something like iPlayer. It wasn't the first video streaming service by any means, but when it was most meaningfully rolled out, it was a really good use of technology to help BBC audiences do something new. So I think that's where I think it does well. And my experience of working with some brilliant people on Bite Size was the same. Was what does the web and web content allow school students to do when they're revising for their exams that the BBC couldn't help them with before? So I think it has a good sense of solving some audience problems or offering audiences value in ways that they couldn't do before.
So it's a really interesting thing which you mentioned up there, kind of the BBC iPlayer, and I think you see it time and time again. Actually, the person who ends up being the front runner tends to be the person who comes second or third.
Yeah.
So I think that's a great example of kind of how good business works, I guess.
Yeah.
But I mean, we see something like what BBC are doing with Bite Size. How was that internally? Because I guess looking at my career and the places I've worked, sometimes I've seen it where what we offer externally kind of sometimes doesn't match what's happening internally. And
oh yes, yeah.
So kind of how was that at the BBC? I mean, could you see that in buckets, or was it actually quite a good reflection? What's your take?
Yeah, I suppose my experience of the BBC as an employee was it's simultaneously exciting and thrilling and exasperating. It's exasperating for all the reasons that you would know about kind of bureaucracy and kind of governmental pace and complexity of decision making. So really complicated and sometimes constipated, to be honest, that you just couldn't decide anything. But then at other times you're working with some of, I think I probably never worked with smarter people than my time at the BBC. Some really brilliant people, very, very creative, individualists with really smart ideas and different ways of thinking. So I think it's sort of, in a way the BBC kind of has those two impulses competing, that creative spark, but also that gut sort of governmental decision making. So I think what you see on the outside, isn't necessarily matched by the behaviour on the inside. If that's what you're getting at.
Yeah, no, I think it's a good summary. So going from the BBC and then kind of getting to where you are right now, Myles, and obviously being mindful of kind of your clients and what you can say and what you can't say. But maybe you could give us a bit of an overview, kind of. Let me think of the first question. Yeah, maybe what does your day look like going from, say, how it was at the BBC to now? What does a typical day look like for Myles?
So these days, I guess, I suppose there's probably not one single day now. I guess it's one of those things about being a freelancer is when things are quiet, you kind of have to make your day, invent your day. So what I'd like to be able to say is that I'm very good at finding time to write and and think and develop myself, but I find probably I'm not quite finding the time to do that at the moment. So I think, I guess a lot of the work that I do now is really around asking questions, I think, and trying to help organizations figure out the most useful ways of answering those questions, but not answering them myself. So I think therefore a lot of the work that I do in a day is trying to uncover what those good and valuable questions look like. And I think as well, trying to keep in contact with clients is a really important point as well. It's one of those things about working for yourself. I think that there's a balance between the objectivity and bringing an external view versus working in isolation and not sort of getting enough, not inheriting enough of the culture and the organization that you're working with as well. So I think I try to spend a lot of time communicating with my clients as well if I can, if that makes sense. That wasn't a particularly picture of a day. That was elements of the work I'm doing at the moment, I think.
No, I mean, that's just as good, right? That's just as good. It's interesting that you mentioned kind of this culture and, listen to a few of my other guests on the podcast and stuff, kind of this thing about culture right now. I think, you've got your employee experience and you've got culture and kind of everything in between. But I think you've got people who think they know what it is, and then people who think they've sussed out the kind of the code to cracking culture. But for you, I guess, what do you see kind of, I mean, and sharing some names who you've seen who do culture really well, maybe not so much people who do it really bad, maybe take them names out, but like what's the biggest, what's the traits of the people who do it really well in your eyes versus them who don't?
I think, I suppose that there's one of the things that I would observe is that I think there's quite a shift in almost like there's a sort of old maturity of cultural maturity that's old school and a new maturity that's emerging. And I think the organizations that I'm most interested in looking at in terms of setting direction for culture are the ones that exhibit a new maturity, which is more about kind of individual, small group decision making and a kind of open sharing, access to expertise, access to communication, speed of decision making, trust. Authority is kind of more distributed, and people are trusted to take decisions and to make mistakes and and learn from them and rectify them. So I think those are kind of really important hallmarks of successful culture now, organizationally. I think so. I did some work with ASOS a couple of years ago. I think they have some elements of that were really, really impressive. I think obviously that perhaps commercially they're not quite doing as well as they were when I was there, although I wouldn't want to take the credit for that. But I think they had some really interesting ways of working and were quite open to those elements. I did some work very early on with FutureLearn, the MOOC platform provider, in my early days of freelancing. I think they were very good on all of those elements, on being very kind of agile with a small A and a large A, and flexible and quick on their feet. Very good with data and very focused on data, I think, which is an evidence-based decision making. So I think those are the elements of culture that feel to me are going to create sustainability for organizations, as things are changing so much. I think those traditional, what we used to call mature culture, is probably more of a challenge now. So I think a lot of the organizations I work with are really interested in trying to understand how to make that transition from a sort of traditional, more hierarchical and more authority-based culture to that sort of a different approach, which is very, very difficult to do, but very important to try.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, because I guess as soon as you kind of mention this, obviously you hear the big names of, we want to be like Spotify, and how does Spotify do it? And you go, you're not Spotify. What will work for them will not necessarily work for you. In fact, the chances are it'll fail for you more than anything. Yeah. And it's interesting because I think you have the big names like Spotify who are quite open about sharing how they do things. I think Monzo do a good job of this as well, kind of sharing how they're doing things. But it's an interesting one. It's a bit like how we see it in the tech world where, magpie syndrome, new shiny toy, everything's got to be that. I feel like you're seeing this in the culture. Like the shiny tools are actually the Googles, the Spotifys, the Monzos, all these so-called the newer way of working and thinking, but it's still the added thing of their problem is different to your problem, and what works for them will not work for you.
Yeah, I think that's right. I suppose I think though, just thinking about that a little bit, though, that I think what those organizations that you've just mentioned have been smart about doing is applying what the technology allows them to do to the problems they need to solve. So it's not so much about, the fact that they've come up with a tool, although it might not be about, sort of mimicking their tools and technology, as you say, but it is about using the ways that they think about technology as a problem solving tool, or as an opportunity to change behavior and to change expectations, etc. I think that's really interesting. So as you said, not everybody should think and try and work like Spotify, but the way Spotify thinks about the platform it creates and its user experience and the value it gives to its users, I think there's probably some useful insights for most of us to apply some of those kind of ways of thinking to our own problems.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think just kind of having this kind of human-centered approach to things is something what I'm personally hearing more and more, which I think, if I stand back to many years ago, I'm sounding like I'm like 900 years old.
I'm with you. Don't worry, I'm always with you. Many years ago is a good place to start for me.
But I think, human-centered design wasn't a term what you use. At the moment, we see the big buzzwords of design thinking and whatnot. But this human-centered design approach kind of fundamentally, I think good designers and good shapers have been doing this before they knew what the term was as such. And they've always kind of just put the human front and centre of everything they do.
I think that's right. Yeah, I suppose what good designers do, and good design, as a discipline, it will help your customer, audience, user, whatever you call them, to get something done. It solves a problem for us, I think, mostly, and that's where I think it's really smart. Where you can apply technology to solve people's problems. That's where there's real value and sustainable value. I think offering technology because it's new and different may or may not solve a problem, but it's not focusing in the right way. And I think the learning and development world is probably famous for getting slightly obsessed with the next big thing. And actually, there's a lot of value in some of the same old things, but just applied in different ways or used to solve problems rather than just the published content.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think Amy Baval uses a great term for this. And she calls it remixing. So looking at what the tech is, but actually how can we stretch and remold and reshape this tech to kind of fix a problem of our people?
Yeah.
I think I use it down to, I was talking with David James a couple of weeks, so we're doing we're doing a talk in June, and we've both got a talk, so I kind of shown him the flow which I was going through, and a large piece of it was this consumer grade experience. And I'm kind of saying, look, this consumer grade experience doesn't need to be this kind of bright, beautiful piece of kit. I mean, it helps, but fundamentally, it needs to fix a problem. And great, good, frictionless kind of UX and simplistic kind of approach that will help that. But for me, this consumer grade experience, this consumer grade tech, it kind of comes down to being able to stack it. And actually, I always use this analogy of social media. I can post something out on Instagram, which I'll post out on Twitter, which will go to LinkedIn. It's one thing, but it's done it to various different things. Yeah. It's can it IoT kind of, does it work with various things? And I think what we see in the digital, if you like, the digital world of corporates is we want this unicorn. And I think the unicorn doesn't exist. I personally think it doesn't exist because it can't fit every single person's problems. It can at best probably do 80%, and then we have to look at bolting on other things around that to make it all work frictionless. But I don't know. When I always step back and when I'm with clients myself, and I go, actually, what you're talking about isn't an LMS. You're actually asking for something that's got a collaboration, community. It's got good UX. It's scalable, and it can be up and down. But actually, fundamentally, it's just this community of slow and fast burn. And actually, I think the more we see it and Mark, challenge me on this if I'm wrong, but I guess the more we see it, the more people are stepping away from this kind of very traditional LMS and more going into this kind of more collaborative and community based approach, I think.
I think that's true. I suppose it's so true for the L&D world, where so much of the tools that we would like to be able to use are ones that are about kind of communication and connection, collaboration, connection. However, I think it's where bringing people together or bringing people to ideas and information. So I think, and those are areas which are really, really well served in consumer technology. Consumer technology on the web's been developing those, and experimenting with them for decades, and has become very, very good at meeting those needs. So I think it's quite hard to see the kind of corporate technology world matching that level of expectation. And I think that's a real challenge as well. I think you're right. And I think one of the problems that the L&D world, and this is not just L&D, it's HR, it's kind of enterprise technologies generally has with consumer grade expectations, is that those expectations are always rising because there's such kind of white heat of competition in the consumer world. So apps and tools and technologies are always being enhanced. So there's it does feel that the enterprise world is stuck in a kind of catch up mode. Which is a real challenge, I think, and it's one of the reasons why kind of LMS vendors are now looking quite sort of dusty and old and very traditional, because they are really quite a way behind now.
It just got me thinking. Kind of one of the things which I'm talking about is actually, if you look at something. So one of the things what I've done in the past with a past client was actually I just flicked on something like an Instagram and I turned it into this kind of lockdown thing where, people who work for the business can come on, join this Instagram, 60-second clips, blah, 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 blah. And actually I end up sitting back and going, actually, you look at some of these social media platforms, and I use social media just because everyone knows what they are. But fundamentally, that gives us more insight than I've seen on most LMSs, because it shows behaviour, it shows what actually people are really interested in.
Yeah.
And I've never heard anyone say, oh Lord, I can't wait to get my company's LMS.
No. Well, I think one of the things as well is if you think that the investment and the success and failures of all these technologies and tools and brands and apps over the last 20 plus years has sort of shaped the technology world, I can't think of anything that looks or feels like an LMS that's ever been available out there in the open web. I don't think there isn't really a market for it for consumers, for individuals. I can't think of an example of one anyway. So it kind of that does, if that hypothesis is right, then it does make you wonder that actually out there in the consumer world there isn't a requirement for an LMS. So actually they're always going to be slightly different then, or fundamentally different to our consumer experiences, which, as you were saying, solve other problems for us and solve them in much more kind of immediate and intuitive ways as well. I think there's something else as well. There's something kind of fundamental in the technology business, the learning technologies business, is that those systems that we're talking about are actually their customers, aren't the users. They're corporate customers who are buying them, and then those corporate customers are trying to satisfy users with them. But the LMS vendors aren't pitching directly at users. If they were, then they'd be building something very different.
Yeah, they definitely would.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
It does pose a question, actually, and this is me just thinking outside the box here. Whether I keep this in or not is another thing. But I think, so then, surely the best vendor will be the one who kind of, going back to this human-centered approach, actually is a person who kind of sits down with the people and goes, right, it's just got me thinking, you're spot on with regard to kind of, whenever I've had to bring in LMS vendors, they've never really asked what the problems are. It's kind of just always been, this is what it is, and this is a problem.
Yeah. And here's our feature set, which is a spreadsheet of 400 different things that the system can do if you wanted to, or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think there is something that signals now that things could change, and this is a maybe. But I think now this idea of learning in the flow of work has started to shift, I think, where organizations might focus their technology investment. That on top of the software as a service, entry of software as a service tools to corporations, things like Zoom and Slack, and now Microsoft Teams as well, which is kind of a response to Slack, I guess. That integration with the tools of work could be an opportunity for LMS systems and other learning technologies to try and sort of regain some relevance. They have to integrate in a smart way that's useful. We wouldn't want to sort of have a SCORM object dropped into your Slack channel. I should imagine that feels horrible. But having context and communication sensitive material, or bookings, etc., surfaced, I think that starts to feel like there might be some opportunity to recover some ground for some of the systems providers there.
Well, it was interesting. I was having a talk with Mark from Filtered.
Yeah.
And I was kind of saying, we was talking a while back, and I was like, look, the first vendor what can tap into the calendar of your users will be the one what succeeds. And I think by buddying up with something like Teams now, I think you're going to see that, and this is me blue sky thinking, but I think, as soon as you can have something what kind of taps into your calendar, and I know I'm going to say a meeting to have a difficult conversation, and it goes, hey, I can see here you've got a difficult meeting coming up, here's some quick support tool or something kind of, and then I think that becomes that more flowy and kind of flowing when you're moving from one touch point to another. But I think the argument is to tap into the calendar more than because I don't know, maybe I'm way off, but for me, I think it would be great if something in the back end control looked at my calendar and went, okay, he's got difficult conversation here, he's got project management over here, he's got X over there, and actually it starts being able to lay in the information.
Yeah. I think you're right. I think probably that the route may be that actually for a really useful learning context that a learning technology might respond to, actually we need data that isn't learning data. So it might be from your calendar, it might be from email, and there's obviously privacy implications there. It might be from your IM channel, or your Slack group, whatever. That's the context. That information defines the context where injecting or placing some learning in could become most relevant and helpful. But I don't think learning data is going to offer that insight of your context as a user. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I completely agree. I think another thing which kind of I was thinking about, and this was probably 2014, I think it was. I kind of sat back. I was working for a corporate. I sat back and went, actually, we just have so much untapped space. Like, but none of us, we looked at kind of IoT and stuff like that, and I was like, we've got so much untapped potential. There's a period when I walk from here to the lift, and a period where I'm in the lift to the 5th floor or whatever. And these are all learning moments where we're escaping. And I say learning moments, I use that term lightly, but there are moments which I think is untapped potential. And I guess, and this is just probably a question, have you seen any business which is kind of tapping into the physical environment and being able to bring the user? I see the physical environment as this organic thing which moves and flows. Well, what should move and flow with its people?
I haven't seen that in a learning context. I guess you see it, in maybe in environmental context for advertising, where commercial messages, where maybe your location is recognized and something happens contextually around you, with a suggestion, or I suppose, and there are maybe it's an extension of these kind of this kind of intrusive dating apps, whether someone like you is nearby. I don't know, so I'm slightly speculating there. I haven't seen that in a learning context, no. But I think there probably is value there.
Interesting. So I guess let's move on to a little bit about you, Myles.
Okay.
We just went off on a tangent then.
It seemed interesting.
Yeah, no, definitely. But I think, coming back to kind of this thing of when it comes to kind of, the work, and I've had various discussions about the work queue and the outside of work queue and how really they should be the same to a point. But when it comes to interviews, we see kind of, we've got to be the best version of us, and we've got to tell people about all our success stories and whatever else. Yeah. But actually, I feel like there's more value to find out, actually, tell me a bit more about your failures. So if I was to ask you the question of, what would your failure resume look like? What would that look like?
What would be my famous failures?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So there's one, I think there's one, this is going back into the history, but seeing as you said you're old enough to remember Jeeves, we actually, in the UK, we killed Jeeves. Well, we did, I suppose, and that's how we talked about it. So we had a long discussion that had been going on for years about whether we should be Ask.com, the search engine, and noticing, the fact that Google was kind of eating the world even back then, and was just very focused on a precise, relevant experience, or should we be Jeeves, the branded experience? And I was on the camp of, no, let's get rid of Jeeves. The future's in the technology and the relevance, and the commercial future is in the advertising industry and the sponsored links, which was true. But I think what I think I underestimated then was how important Jeeves as a brand icon was to why people would choose the product, and also how hard or impossible it would have been and was to compete with Google, on their engineering, with their engineering might. Just the number and the size of the brains they had. We couldn't ever get the same number or the same size of brains. So I think that was a mistake, definitely. No, should have stuck with Jeeves, created a more, maybe a kind of personal assistant like branded experience.
Yeah.
More of a personal problem-solving engine than just a search engine. Perhaps that probably would have taken quite a lot of engineering as well. But I think getting rid of Jeeves was a bad idea. But I was a proponent. I wanted to kill Jeeves as well, and we did. And I think we were wrong.
It's really interesting you bring up this kind of. So you look at Google now, and Google is, well, the beast that Google is, but kind of talking about Ask Jeeves there, more and more I think we're coming into this experience economy, and actually we demand more. It's a bit like you kind of, when you're boxing, if you're a world-class boxer, you're only remembered for the last fight.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think, when you look at something like Ask Jeeves, hindsight is a great thing. But actually, when you look at that now and you look at kind of where voice assistants is going and this experience, actually, Ask Jeeves would have been a great brand, personal.
Yeah, you'd imagine Jeeves as a personal assistant with chat, voice, conversational interface. That would be perfect. Well, perfect for lots of people, not for everybody.
Yeah, that is very true. True.
Yeah.
Okay, so next couple of questions there for Myles. These can be fast track questions. We can go as deep as you want on them as well.
Right.
So if you was to give a gift of a book to 5 people, what book would you give? And maybe it can be, what's the one book what's changed your life, your mindset and stuff, and what you think 5 people should read?
Okay. I think that's a good one. I think there's a book I read a long time ago and reread. I don't reread many books at all. I don't read enough as much as I'd like. There's a book called Gone to Soldiers by Marge Piercy, and it's an amazing kind of saga of various different characters' lives and how they survive or don't through the Second World War in various different countries. And it was just an absolutely a beguiling and fascinating story of totally different worlds and how that Second World War changed their lives completely. Yeah, so I'd highly recommend that to anybody. I'd recommend to more than 5 people if I could.
Okay. I've personally never heard of that, so we'll put that on.
Yeah, so I can't mind. That sprung to mind. I read it. It must be 25 plus years ago that I read that, but it's a really, really great story.
Wow. Okay, that's kind of sound to the experience what you had. The experience it's left in you. It's quite impressive.
Yeah, I don't know why. I hadn't thought about that for a long time, so thank you for reminding me. Maybe I need to read it a third time.
So going back to this kind of, this is more about you, Myles, more than anything. But kind of, you've bought a billboard, and this billboard's right outside the stadium, which 100 people are going to come out of in the next hour. 100 million people, sorry.
A million people.
Yeah, a million people, and they're going to see your billboard. What would you put on that billboard?
So 1 million people are going to see what I put on the billboard as they come out. I would say, relax. Hardly anybody knows what they're doing, really.
Okay. Wow, that's true.
I would probably can't. I would ask a copywriter to refine that sentiment, I think. But the idea being that, in my experience now of being an adult and being a worker of various different types, most of us are making it up as we go along. Partly because most of us are trying to do something new and different as well. So I think quite often people who seem very, very confident know exactly what they're doing actually don't really know.
That's true. I think we see these kind of studies what are happening, kind of the future skill set. I think the future skill set is being able to wing it.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think the ability to improvise is really, really important. Yeah, really important for vital survival skill, definitely.
So I guess this kind of goes more towards your because I kind of want to get into this experience design. You know, I think you put a post out recently, and we talked about that a little bit on LinkedIn and stuff.
Oh yes, okay.
But I guess who do you see who's doing cool stuff? Yeah, and this can be maybe your customers or, you know, people who you've seen on LinkedIn and whatever else. But maybe it's more about the corporate. Which businesses do you see doing cool stuff?
Yeah, okay. I think I spent quite a lot of time. I haven't worked with them so much recently, but one of my first clients when I was freelancing was the John Lewis Partnership, and I did some work with them very early on. As I suppose it was one of the first things I did was sort of spent a few days just looking at their digital learning content services within the organisation, the different products and tools they were using, and did a bit of a kind of a UX review of them. And then I worked with them over then a few years. And one of the things that they did that was really, I think, really interesting was they set up a UX team in the HR function. So there's a guy who now runs. I can't remember his job title, but he runs the user experience team. And his team are now responsible for UX reviews and planning and testing for a variety of different products and systems. And I think it's back to that thing that you were saying, Danny, I guess, about the mindset versus the making. And I think one of the things that they've really done that's interesting is they've sort of really started to adopt that mindset and now network with, you know, they have various different sort of testing tools and services. They work with the John Lewis, I think John Lewis online retail. I can't remember what the name of the product is. So, you know, I think they've really started to establish that user experience and experience design as a really important part of the world in learning, but also beyond learning. So I think that was really interesting. And I guess as a consultant, it was kind of really gratifying to work with them on that as well. I wouldn't want to claim credit for the success of it, but, you know, I was involved with some of their early plans and thinking, and, you know, helped them with some workshops and that kind of stuff. So I think that's one of the really interesting examples from my client work.
Cool. Which then moves us on seamlessly into the experience design, learning experience design. So yeah, I mean, maybe Myles, you could give us a bit of a brief overview of that kind of. I think it was I can't remember if it was an article now or it was just a status what you put out there around learning experience designers. And
yeah, I remember. I think this was something I posted a blog post maybe two or 3 weeks ago.
Yeah.
About where and how do you where do you find your learning experience designers, or how do you build a learning experience design capability? So I think, well, I and this is true of many clients I've worked with, and a few currently and in the past as well, where they're trying to make a change from, you know, from the creation of content or instructional design background and heritage to a more kind of agile and broad-based experience design capability. So that would include, you know, all kinds of experiences, I guess. And one of the things that I think a lot of organizations are trying to figure out is, and this was put simplistically in the blog post because, you know, people read blog posts when they have simplistic clickbait titles. But would you, if you had to choose, would you create learning experience designers from your existing team and sort of school them in the ways of user experience and experience design from a learning background? Or would you bring in experience designers and UX practitioners from outside the learning world and then school them in the ways of learning in your organization? And I guess that's a lot. I think one of the reasons I wrote the blog post was I think, you know, learning experience design is very fashionable at the moment. I don't know what you think, Danny, but it seems to be a very, it's an often used phrase. And I think a lot of people are looking for learning experience designers. A lot of people are claiming to be learning experience designers. So it's kind of hot. It's a hot segment of the recruitment market as well. So the reason I wrote the post was trying to sort of think that through. You know, as if you had to choose, if you can't find learning experience designers, but you can find UX designers, or you have got instructional designers, or you've got, you know, other learning designers, then, you know, which direction would you go in? So that's what I was trying to sort of ponder in that blog post.
And I thought it was a great blog post. I think I wrote on there about, actually, I don't think learning experience design is a thing anyway.
Yes, that's right. Yeah,
I just try to be a little bit provocative, but I kind of, for me, you know, the thing what really grinds my gears, and it's not, I don't think it's L&D specific. I think it's just, you know, it's every industry. But what I've noticed is all of a sudden, lots and lots of people have changed their job title from instructional designer to learning experience designer.
Yeah.
And I'm like, And when learning experience designer becomes less buzzy and something else comes in, I'll see that change.
Yeah.
And then that'll change again. And I kind of think, actually, the more things try to change, the more they stay the same. And I guess for me, I dropped a learning experience designer as a title a good while ago because,
Right.
I mean, if I look at where I'm at right now, my role is, depends who you ask, my role is either learning consultant or learning experience architect, which is another term.
Yeah.
So I don't think learning experience designers exist. I think experience designers exist, and a byproduct of that is a learning experience, or it's a immersive experience, or an educational one, or a aesthetic experience, or whatever.
Yeah.
But I think you mentioned back about, actually, good shout, but it's kind of like this. It's kind of just this rephrasing of old things, and I think the way I kind of ponder around this is more around, actually, I think before we can address what the job title should be and what it should be, I think we should really address what the future L&D team should look like. Like if I was given, if I'm to lead up a team like I've done in the past, I don't know how much I would reach out to the L&D industry.
I think that's a really good question, and I think it's back to that, some of the things we were talking about moments ago, about what are the forces that are shaping the L&D world, and the forces that are shaping the L&D world are from outside the world of L&D, and the L&D world is trying to catch up and respond. Yeah. So I think you're right. If that's true, and I think most people would recognise that that's true, then you should probably look outside for the people who have the insights and skills and experience that you'd want to build your service on.
So I remember when I think Nick Shackleton-Jones, right? I remember when I very first went working for Nick, it was he asked me this question. He was like, "How do you stay on top of it?" I went, "I don't look at anything what's happening in L&D." And he's like, "Why?" And I was like, "Because if I do what everyone in L&D is doing, it's always going to be the same." So a lot of the stuff which I do, I take from product design, service design. I take a lot from kind of experience design. I take a lot from marketing, actually, and comms and engagement. So yeah. So when I look at the team and someone says to me, and I put a comment out on LinkedIn actually last week, and I was like, is L&D really needed anymore? Like, I can't even remember how I phrased it, but it was like, some people felt like I was taking a job off them, and I was like, I was like, well, at the end of the day, You're turning around to me and saying, you need to be able to design a good onboarding program. A service designer could do that. Given the right context, the right information, and Google, he'll probably be able to design a lot better onboarding program than what you can design.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think one of the things that's interesting as well, you can see this starting to happen, is that digital agencies starting to move in, either accidentally or deliberately, into kind of L&D digital projects. These are kind of communications and branding and advertising agencies and product development agencies who, because of what you were saying, are quite capable of offering a really, really good service to a client, but they don't have the L&D background, and but arguably they don't need it. I think they can bring in, they're good at, at content creation, they're good at the editorial skills, they're good at the marketing skills, they're good at the product management, I think, which is a really important area. They're very good at product development and management. They're good at problem solving, and they're good at using data and testing. And then they apply those skills and those ways of working to a learning challenge and coming up with some really interesting and creative solutions. And they haven't got a learning background. And I think that's interesting. So maybe the role of L&D there is to create the brief for them, but sort of step away from the design and build.
Exactly. The way I see it is, when we look at someone who does a design thinking, and first thing they want to do is empathize, they've been using skills such as kind of audience interviews and whatever else. They've been using this for years. Yeah. In L&D, I'm still struggling to see people who are doing this well. I'm like, actually, they are way ahead of the curve anyway. So just quickly looking at stats now, it had 6,000 views, 29 comments, and predominantly most of them all kind of went for the, yes, they should keep it. And I still disagree.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I think it's probably as well. It's probably not quite as simple as that. So I think one of the things that technology has done is allowed. It makes it very, very easy for people to make our own stuff. So you can now do that in house. So actually, if you need to do kind of tactical, quick turnaround stuff, do you want to go outside for that? Maybe make videos and write blog posts, etc., within the L&D team yourself. So I think it's never quite as simple as only going outside for those skills and capabilities. I think the fact that you can do things easily has been one of the L&D's biggest problems, though, because I think we're all guilty of making content when we don't need to. So I think it's quite complicated. But I think if you've got, I would say, if you want to do something innovative and new, kind of product development side, then I think you probably do need to look outside, or it would be healthy to.
Yeah, I mean, and this kind of, the reason why I brought this up is because I think once we define what that team is and what that kind of, what that, and let's use the term new L&D looks like, from that point onwards, then we can describe what the job title should be. Because I think if you ask 20 different people now what kind of experience design is, you're going to get 20 different answers on what that is.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that's true, and that's one of the challenges now, isn't it? It means everything and nothing.
Yeah, exactly. Like at some, job titles probably mean nothing anyway most of the time now. But it's an interesting. It was kind of good because it got me thinking. It got me triggered to kind of think. Actually, I mean, God forbid if I lead up a team.
Go for it. Do it.
Yeah, I'm not sure the old L&D team. Mind you, there's an opportunity for development, so why not?
Yeah. Yeah, there's always an opportunity.
So I guess a kind of just moving a little bit away from kind of the L&D space as such, but this can be a deep question for you. So, Myles, do you even like yourself?
Do I like myself? At times, but I would say probably infrequently. I think the older you get, maybe the more you realise your kind of weakness and failures. I think most of the time I put up with myself. And I think sometimes I'm quite pleased with what I get done, and inevitably other times I'm appallingly ashamed of myself as well. So I'd say I cross the spectrum there. I think I have my moments, but there are many varied moments, and they're dark and light.
Okay, great answer. So this kind of moves me on to social media.
Yeah, I'm now thinking about that question far too hard. So I'm staring out the window, pondering that. Feeling quite uncomfortable. So yeah, let's move on.
Yeah, definitely. So I guess it kind of goes into this question really. Do you even like yourself? I think if we asked that question before social media, you probably get a lot more yeses than nos. But kind of social media. I think recently, it might have been you actually who shared it around Twitter's approach to trolling and negative behaviour. I think it was you. I've got this in my back of my mind. I think you either shared it or you wrote something about it. But kind of social media.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think it's a net positive or net negative to society?
Oh, that's a good and very difficult question. I think I would have definitely said it's a net positive. I think I was very much one for the kind of democracy of communication. And now I don't think it's possible to know at the moment how to answer that question. I think we've seen some really dangerous behaviour, manipulation on social media, and it really started to take hold in very, very dark and unpleasant ways, both individually and in trying to influence large groups and politically as well. So I don't think we can answer that question at the moment, Danny. I don't think we know, and I don't think we have the information to be able to say one way or the other. But I think it's definitely changed, and my hope is that people are more aware that it's not just a good thing. It's not simply an innocent pastime anymore. It has implications, and we need to think about it harder than we used to, I think.
Okay. So then, applying that question, what's your take on the L&D social media presence? So let's put you in the user's shoes. So when you wake up in the morning, you go on LinkedIn. I'm assuming you check your phone when you get in, but you maybe don't. But you go on LinkedIn, you go on Twitter, and if your timeline is anything like mine, it's for lots and lots of people having lots and lots of rants or or voicing their
Yeah.
opinion. But what's your take on the L&D social media space?
So I don't think we have enough kind of constructive discussion in social media. I think this is probably not just true of L&D, but that's the community, one of the communities I know best, I guess. Where I think there's inevitably there's elements of kind of showing off and look at me, which is one of the most horrible patterns of behaviour in social media all round. But I think I think there's an opportunity for us to have more kind of constructive disagreement than we do. I think there's lots of it's probably not enough variety of tone in there. I think someone like Donald Clark's very good on sort of, getting debate going. I think Nick's good at that as well. But I don't think we have enough proper discussion on social media as an industry. I don't know. What do you think?
This is an hard question for me to answer, because when I got into L&D years ago, I found it an absolute struggle to get my voices heard, my ideas heard, because it's kind of people at the top tend to stay at the top until they either retire or die.
Mm-hmm.
So
that's an age-old pattern of behaviour, that, isn't it?
Yeah, so it kind of got me thinking, like, I understand, maybe your ideas are great and they're fantastic, but actually, if you're not getting your speaking gigs and you're not getting your opportunities, and maybe sometimes you have to do that on social media to kind of shout your ideas. The problem is a limitation in characters, and like you mentioned, the tone and how that goes with actually, I know for a fact that I have dyslexia, so when I tweet, my tweets are full of made up words, but like talking, you can hear where my flow in my conversation, but I don't know. I think there's a lot of regurgitation.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes the regurgitation becomes a noise, and then some of the best ideas are kind of, forgotten.
I think that's right. I think that's one of the challenges with social media at the moment, is that, because there is so much noise, that the good ideas and healthy discussion, useful discussion, can be very hard to notice and hard to pick out.
Yeah, it's a tricky one. But
yeah,
this leads me on to kind of, who are 3 people who you think everybody should be following? And this is in the L&D space. Maybe it's new up and comers, maybe it's people you've worked with in the past. And 3 people, please.
Okay, so there's a guy who I've worked with. He's one of these digital agencies called Russ Hendy, Hendy. He runs an agency called 02E Media, or 02E Digital Media, maybe, I can't remember the name. He's good. He's written something really interesting recently on Medium about learning technologies as a developer from the outside. He's a good value, I think. I like David James as well. He's a good provocateur in this space, I think. And I know you spoke with him, David.
Yeah.
I think so I think I would say he's good value. And for a third one, there's a guy called Mark Britz, Britz, or Z rather, because he's in North America, I think. And he's very good on social collaboration, culture. He's really, really good on that stuff. He's very thoughtful, very experienced as well. So those are 3 people I would recommend.
Awesome. Okay. So it's kind of with that in mind, and I'm going to dip into a little bit more. And this what I want you to do here, Myles, is don't think too much about these answers. So I'm going to give you some words. I want you to tell me what comes to mind.
Okay, word association.
Correct. It can be absolutely anything. It could just literally be how you feel about it, or just something that comes to mind.
I hope my vocabulary is in order. Let's see.
Just do. I do and make words up. It's fine.
Okay. Yeah, thank you.
So the first one, e-learning.
Historic.
Okay. Digital transformation.
Overblown and overused.
Okay. LMS.
Dangerous.
And for the last one, instructional designers.
I don't know what that means.
Okay.
Those were 4, but so I now recognise that with the digital world, that this will get distributed, and in years to come, possibly if anybody still cares, there might be moments of regret. But those were immediate, off the cuff responses.
Perfect. So, I guess kind of going back to your development, and you mentioned you don't you get time to kind of read and write, but actually when was the last time you was took out your comfort zone in a form of a development opportunity?
Well, I think starting up as a freelancer has been a big one, and sort of understanding what that really means. I think, on a personal and professional level, that's been really, really interesting. Learn just all sorts of different things about, kind of what your pitch is, what your value is. Can you pitch it? Should you do it? That's been really interesting and ongoing as well. I think I'm still learning a lot about that. I'm doing a project at the moment where we're working with one client on sort of L&D capability build and change, and working with a team of people that I didn't really know and work with before. And that's been great because there's lots of new ideas, different ways of thinking, different ways of working, and all of us trying to help, sort of pitch in to make the project as effective as possible. So that's been that's been really good. And as having worked for quite a few years on my own, coming back into a team environment, having that plurality of voices and experiences is really good as well, and some challenge and debate, which when you work on your own can be hard to find. So I've really enjoyed that, and interestingly, against what we've been saying, perhaps, working with some thoroughbreds of the learning and development world, and that's teaching me a lot because it's not my background. So that's been really interesting as well, to sort of get a sense of some of the more important themes on your point of, these aren't necessarily new ideas, but the reason that they still work is because they're strong ideas. And that has been good to sort of to get to grips with some of that thinking as well.
Okay, perfect. So I guess coming to the end now, what 5 tips would you give to someone who wants to be the next Myles and kind of go through the career and stuff, what you've done?
Someone who wants to be the next Myles, I think I would certainly question their wisdom. So someone who's going to follow a similar path, is that?
Yeah.
Danny? I would say it's really, really important to keep looking for good ideas. Keep looking, as you were saying as well. Keep your eye on what's going on outside, in the outside world. I would say that it's really important to spend a lot of time communicating as well. With your team. If you're a team leader, and I've done a lot of that, you need to communicate consistently and as openly as possible. So I think that would be another tip. And I would say, I think something that I think has been really, really important for me is always look for data and evidence. Never take anything on assumptions. I think that's really important. I think I would say, and this is not necessarily because I've done it, but because I now think it's true, is try and work on things that are really important to you. Things that you care about wherever you can. I refuse to use the word. The P word, the passion word, because I think I find that overstated. But something, focus on things that you care about, because that's where you'll work your best and work your hardest. And I think probably so. That's 4. That the 5th would be maybe try and find people that you enjoy working with as well. I think, which is probably related to the other one. If you work on things that you care about, you're probably going to find the people that you like to work with as well. So I think those are sort of 2 related points that are really important.
Perfect. Thank you. So I guess at the start of the show, I kind of asked you to pick 5 numbers, and we will come to them shortly. But I guess just one more question, really. So when I asked you at the start kind of what it is you wanted to be when you grew up, and you mentioned, I think you said, a cricketer and a musician. We never continue to, we never stop growing and developing ourselves. And if I was to say kind of what is it you want to be now, Myles? What is it you want to be when you grow up?
I'd still want to be a musician. I think music's always been so important, in my life since I was very small through to now. Listening to it, playing it, talking about it, finding new things to listen to. So I think, that would be, I'd love to be a musician still. If only I had the talent and the time.
Fair enough. So the 4 numbers. So the idea is you are based on a desert island.
Right.
And these 4 numbers are associated to 4 random, the numbers are associated to a list of random items. The items that you picked was a canvas, a key ring, a nail file, and a screw.
A screw. Yeah. A canvas like a painting canvas.
Yep.
A key ring.
Yep.
A nail file and a screw. So I would use the canvas to try and draw or paint the most beautiful picture that I could of a scene or a person that's not on the desert island. And I would hang that on a tree with the screw. What was a key ring and what was the other one?
It was a nail file.
A nail file. So I think I would use the nail file to file my nails, because I'm clearly quite literal after all. And I would use the key ring to hang some of the more important tools that I've created to survive from on the tree as well.
Okay, awesome. I have to admit, Myles, you've had the hardest one so far, to be fair.
Have I? Really? Because that did feel difficult.
So
hence using the nail file to file nails. That doesn't feel very creative, but it's the best I could come up with.
So I guess, Myles, just before we go, where can people find out a little bit more about what you're up to and your ideas?
So I guess on LinkedIn. So just find me there, and on Twitter at Myles Run, MYLESRUN, and that's where I would post things and sort of thoughts and ideas and reflections on my blog as well, which is at mylesrunham.com. So those are probably the three places that you'd find me most usefully.
Awesome. Well, Myles, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Danny. I enjoyed that. It's a great conversation. Good questions. Thank you.
Awesome. Enjoy the rest of the evening, Myles.
Thank you, and you. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.